This is Matthias at Unity Park. I'm gonna give you a quick demonstration of our load testing tool called uTsung. With uTsung, you can simulate very large amounts of players using regular Linux machines, keeping your hardware costs to a minimum. As you can see here, we have a Snowbox client, which we will connect to a server running on a Windows machine in our network. There are no other players logged into this server right now, as you can see. We're all alone running around. And to your left here we have a terminal window where we are logged into a Linux machine where we have uTsung installed. And I'm now gonna start uTsung and I'm gonna simulate 100 Snowbox players, like this. And if we take a look in the client, soon all the simulated players will join us and all hell will break loose. This is extremely useful. Using small amounts of hardware and some simple script programming, you can simulate hundreds and thousands of players in your game. You can then verify that the server doesn't get overloaded and that it behaves correctly during high load. And of course the same thing for the client. You can make sure that the frame rate is acceptable and that there aren't any bugs when the number of players rise. So, how does all this work? Well, let me bring up another terminal window and I will show you. As you perhaps noticed, we specified an XML file for uTsung when we started it. This file was called uLink.xml. We're going to take a look at it to see how we configure uTsung. I'm just going to give you a quick glance here of the configuration. I can look at our manual chapter on uTsung on our developer site if you want to delve into all the details. As you can see, it's divided up into several sections. The first section is called clients. And this section defines which machines we want to use for generating the load. In our case, we're only using one machine, but soon can easily use several. Just add more entries here. The second section is called servers, and this defines the actual game servers that we want to test. You just specify the host and the port. The type should always be uLink. If you want to test more than one server at the same time, you just add more entries here, and uTsung will use a round-robin algorithm for picking a server for each player. The load section basically defines how many players we want to simulate and how quickly we want to add them to the game. In our case, we're simulating 100 players, arriving with 0.3 seconds between them. Further down here we have the session section, which will describe the gameplay session that uTsung will use to simulate a player. In our case, we have defined a very simple game loop where we will send 10 server move RPCs to the server every second, describing our movement, and every 3 seconds we will send a throw RPC to the server to indicate that we're throwing a snowball. You may notice here that we only specify the names of the RPCs, but we also of course have to send proper arguments to the server. For example, when sending a throw RPC, you should send a vector describing the direction of the snowball. And all this stuff is handled by a JavaScript module that's defined here in the options section. In our case, we're using a JavaScript file called snowbox.js, and this module you need to implement for every game that you want to load test using uTsung, and it contains all the gameplay specific logic for your game. And we're going to take a look at this example file. I'll show you a bit what it looks like. First of all, you have to define a class called player session, and in this class you define the state of the player. This state can be anything you like. In our case, we keep the position, velocity and the rotation of the player. And then there are a few callback functions that you need to implement that uTsung will call during the test run to get gameplay specific information. For example, we have this throw RPC. Every time uTsung wants to send this RPC, it will ask our gameplay module for the proper arguments, and it will call a function called getThrowRPCArgs. And here we have implemented so that we return a proper vector based on the velocity and the rotation of our player. You can also define handlers for when the server sends an RPC to the client. In Snowbox, for example, there is an RPC called adjustOwnerPosition that the server sends to the clients every time it detects that it's out of position and it needs to correct itself. And here we have implemented a function called handleAdjustOwnerPositionRPC, and this function will be invoked every time we receive such an RPC from the server, and we use the data in the RPC from the arguments to correct our position. So this is basically everything you need to test your game with uTsung. Once you have installed uTsung and defined your XML configuration and written a JavaScript file, you can start testing your game like this. I should also mention that uTsung is free and open source. You can just grab it from our website. It's based on an existing load testing tool called uTsung, which is really awesome and can be used for load testing a bunch of different types of servers and protocols. But we have tweaked it and hacked it a little so that you can use it for load testing uLink games. It's written in a language called Erlang, which is probably the best platform for writing these types of distributed networks applications. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed the show, and thanks for watching.